That's the episode 22 today, design pattern part 2. Unfortunately, we were not able to meet last week. We'll try to have continue next 2 session, which is design pattern part 3 and the Q&A. About myself, I'm a Jitendra Zaa, senior Salesforce technical architect in IBM. You can follow me on my Twitter handler, which is Jitendra Zaa. So today's agenda is more on hands-on, creating a problem and solving those problems using design pattern. And very specifically, we are going to cover creational design pattern, which is a singleton and factory. And we will see if there is any Q&A at the end. Some house rules like please mute your mic. You can keep adding question in Zoom. Q&A window. Don't hesitate to ask any question. I will try to answer as much as I can. And we'll try to answer those questions basically in the last moment. So in the part 1 of the design pattern, we talk about what is the solid principle, what is gang of 4, and then we talk about that what are the 23 design patterns, just a summary, just the name basically. So in today's session, we are going to focus on creational patterns. And as you can see on here, there are total 5 creational patterns, which are abstract factory, builder pattern, factory method, prototype, and singleton. We don't have enough time to go through each and every one. However, I would go with one of the most 2 famous design pattern which we have, which are normally used in the Salesforce world. So let's go with the problem. So let's assume that this is the problem given to us, that whenever the lead gets inserted, we need to auto-populate rating on the basis of company name. And the mapping between the company name and the rating is stored in a different table. So let me explain you the problem. So the problem is we have a lead, and let's say I create a new lead, and let's say the company name is IBM, or let's say company name basically is Salesforce, and there is some last name here. What I'm expecting to do here is, if the company name is Salesforce, this rating field should be populated. Now, how that information would come over? I have a custom object named rating mapping, and this custom object, as you can see, it only needs 2 inputs. So I'm going to enter Salesforce, and the rating for the Salesforce, I see any lead which is coming from Salesforce should be hot rating. Just an example, I saved. So this is the challenge, and we are going to solve this challenge without knowing what is the design pattern and everything. So what I will do is I will start a trigger on lead, and I can say lead trigger, and as object as lead. And I'm saying that this trigger should execute either on before insert event and before update event. We actually covered there is a whole episode on the trigger. If you're not familiar with trigger, go ahead and see those recordings. It's on our YouTube channel, but I will try to explain everything again. So as per the best practice, so the trigger basically, whenever you perform any DML operation, data manipulation, which is creating a record, updating a record, or deletion of record, you can write some custom logic. Now our logic is, whenever the lead record gets created or updated on the basis of company name, I want to populate this field automatically. Now this is something, to me it seems trigger is the best solution here. So we go on the trigger, and as we know, the best practice is do not write any code in trigger. Always use something like lead trigger handler. Let's assume that there is a class lead trigger handler. We are going to call a method. I will say update lead, and let's assume that update lead method is going to take trigger.new. So trigger.new means all the new record which is in the transaction going to be passed to this. So now as you can see, I am getting a compiler error saying that the variable lead trigger handler does not exist. What I will do is I will create a new Apex class, and in this Apex class I'm going to create a public static method. I am not using the keyword new here. As you can see, that means update lead method is the static method. So I'm saying public static. I don't expect anything to be returned. Wait, the method name is update lead, and we are, so basically I know that this method is trigger.new is nothing but the list of lead, and I will say list of lead. So this is the handler. This class is going to do some magic. So what I'm going to do is, first I need to get so any code we write in a trigger, we cannot assume that it is only going to be for one record. It has to be bulkified, because lead can be created using data loader or some integration tool in a bulk. So what I will do is I will write a for loop on lead. Our lead is in variable lst led. Now every element in this list is of type lead. So what I'm saying is iterate through list of lead, and each element which is in the lead would be denoted as an L. So now what I'm doing is I want all the company names. So what I will do is I will create a collection of the company name. Set of string, set is the right collection here. The reason is I don't want a duplicate company name. It's just kind of array. The difference between array and the set is array or list can have a duplicate element, but set cannot have duplicate element. So I'm saying set of company names equals to new set of string. And then what I will do is I will say set of company names dot add L dot API name. So API name is company. Let's see what I can do is I can go on setup. I can go in object manager, search for lead, and search for company. You see the company API name is company. So we are almost right there. I am going to drag and drop this somewhere. Okay. So company is the right API name. So now what happened is I have a set of company. What I need to do now is I need to query this custom object, which is a rating mapping for all the record which has this company there. So basically what I need to do something is like this. I want to do select ID. Let's say from the object name is, if I go on here, object name is rating mapping. Simply let's say find the record I want to get. So you can see that there are two records, and if you say okay object, if I go on the field names, what are the field names here? Field name is company underscore name underscore C, and another field I'm interested is rating field. Any custom field you create in Salesforce ends up with underscore C. So if there is no underscore field, that means a standard field by Salesforce. Underscore C, that means this is custom field, this is custom field. Now the object name also have underscore C, that means this is a custom table for the non-Salesforce person. That's what we are creating. If I execute this query now, as you can see, I have two record, IBM and Salesforce, and I have rating as hot. So now I need to rewrite this query. So this is SQL. We again have a dedicated session on SQL that you can go back on the YouTube channel and learn how do we write SQL. It's pretty similar with SQL with some of the caveat and the guards around those. So I'm saying give me all the company and rating where I'm saying company underscore name underscore C is in, let's say IBM. I only want to get IBM value. Right now there are only two record, but it can have thousands of record. So if I run here like this, So this is the query we are going to write in Apex. So I'm going to close all this. Let's come back here. Now the question is, how should we write? So again, the trigger handler as per normal best practice should not have all the logic. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to again create a new Apex class, and name of the Apex class can be something like rating mapping util. And what this class is going to do is, let's assume that this class has a list of this custom object list company mapping, I can say. And then what we will do is, let's write a constructor here. Public constructor does not have a return type. Method name is same as the class name. Now what I want to do is, let's have a set of string here saying set company name. Let's say we assume we are going to pass this, and then what we will do is we will do the query. We will do the same query we are writing here, copy and paste. All we really need is ID. I really don't need company name because company name is already there. The question is, what is the harm in writing a field which is not needed? So there is no harm in a small project. However, every variable you create in Salesforce uses your heap memory. So try to avoid unnecessary variables or unnecessary field in your select clause. Now all you have to do is, now this IBM is set. So what I am going to do is, I want all the rating where the company name is in this set, which we are passing, which is this one. Now for Salesforce compiler, there is no way to know that what is this? Is it a variable name or some field name or where clause? We have to use colon. So now Salesforce would be able to identify that what we are trying to do is actually the variable. So let's assume that everything is there. Now what we will say is public string get rating, and what will happen is we will pass company name here, one company name, and what we will do is we will say string return value equals to, let's say, blank, and then we again will write a for loop. So our result is already here in list of company name, list of company map basically. So I will say list of company map, and I would be having this. So every variable is like that. So every R in this map is of rating mapping. All I will do is if R dot, okay, so company name we would need, because we need to compare. That means we need to have it here. Otherwise we will get an error that you're trying to access a field which does not exist. So I will say if company name is equals to the company name which is passed in a method, then we will say return value equals to R dot rating, because that's what we need. And then we will break. So using break keyword, basically you can break from for loop, and then all we have to do is return value. If there is no break, that means no company found, that means the return value is blank. So we are covered here. So let's try to save this class. Perfect, this class is saved. Now what we will do here is, this query is done. We will go back here again. Now we will try, we have already our class here. So I will say rating object equals to new. Now this constructor, as you can see, the constructor accepts the set of company ID that we need to pass. Our set of company ID is this, we already defined. So we'll get to here. Now again we have to loop through all the lead again, and I'm saying iterate through list of all lead, and then for all rating. So let's see what is the API name of rating for lead object. So I will go and search lead, search for the rating field, because that's what we want. So API name is rating _c, that means it's a standard field. Now this rating we are going to get from this object, and this object has a method get rating. So I will call get rating and pass the company name. Now company name, we already have lead has a company. So company name, whatever it is returned, if it found, it will return a proper rating. If it's company not found, rating would be blank, and that's it. So let's try to save it, see if there is any compiler error. Working fine. Let's save this. So let's see what we try to do. So we have written a trigger on lead. This will execute only if the record is being inserted or updated before event. We are calling a trigger handler because as per the best practice, you should not write code directly in the trigger. I'm here. We call this method. What this method is doing, it is collecting the company name, and then it is calling this class rating mapping util. It is going here in the constructor, it is querying it. Then we are calling get rating. We are iterating through the result which we got it, and we are setting up the rating. So let's see if it even works or not. So what I will do is I will go here. I will create a new record. Okay, not here. I'm going to lead, new lead, and I will say, let's say last name Jaa. Let's say the company name is Salesforce, and that's it. And let's try. So if you see, rating is empty. I'm not providing any rating here, but I'm providing Salesforce. Let's save it. If our trigger executed successfully, I'm expecting rating as a hot. So as you can see, rating is hot. Let's go back on this custom object rating mapping, and let's say that okay, anyone from Salesforce should not be hot. Basically, it should be the rating should be, let's say, warm. I saved it. Now so we see that when we try to create a lead, it worked. Now let's try to edit this lead. I'm not doing anything. As you can see, previous value is hot. I'm saving it. Now you can see the new rating is warm. So that means our code is working fine, perfect. We achieved what was asked. But as we know, that's not a life always. What happened is, so this whole code which I have written, this is the URL I would be posting on my website. You can see. Now, as I said, right, change is constant. Whenever we are writing any code, make sure you're writing a code in such a way that that code is going to be changed in the future. So the new requirement is, if website field is present, then set the lead source field equals to web. Now the problem is there is no developer in the team, let's assume, and there is only admin. Now admins, let's assume, don't know how to write a efficient trigger in Apex. They decided, okay, why not to use a process builder or workflow rule? But before I do that, let me show you something. If I go on my developer console, if I go, let me delete all my logs. As a developer, good developer, I would always suggest whenever you're writing a piece of functionality, so let's say this is my functionality, I'm changing it to hot. I'm expecting that to become warm again. It's still warm. If I go on my developer console, I see the log. Two logs are there. So one log is internal log. How do I know? My experience. You can try to open. But one log is our code log in developer console. So if you can see in the log section, if you have a developer console open, you can open your log. I'm opening in the raw format. My favorite part is this part always. If you want to be a good developer, Salesforce has a governor limit. Don't assume that your code is always going to work. So now I see that I have my one SQL query. I have issued one SQL query, and that SQL query is returning one record. That is my limit. And where my SQL query, as you can see, I have written SQL query on the line number 6. That perfectly makes sense. Now the new requirement is saying is, if the website field is present, then set lead source as a web. Basically what it is saying is, if I write, let's say, https salesforce.com, lead source should automatically become web. I don't need to select that. That's the requirement. Now, no developer admin went ahead. There is no problem there. They went in a process builder and they created a new process builder on lead. So I already have built a process builder so that I don't spend much time here. So this is the lead field update, very simple process builder. It is written on lead. Every time it will work whenever record is created or edited. And what it will do is it will check if the website is not blank. If website is not blank, what we are doing is on the lead record, we are changing the lead source as a web. So let me activate this process builder. So this process builder is here. My developer console all ready to collect the log. Let's see if it works. So I'm going to update website as salesforce.com and lead source is none. I'm not doing anything. If my process builder is working fine, lead source should automatically become web. As you can see, lead source did become web. So my process builder is working fine. My trigger is working fine. But as a best practice, I went in my code and I tried to open a log just to make sure that something wrong didn't happen. When I go on the cumulative log, this is the problem I found. This is a found. Now this is very common problem for anyone new on the platform. Either they are coming from Java background, .NET background, or you are a superstar developer, you need to understand. Initially, I was using only one SQL. How the one SQL became 3 SQL? That is the concern. Again, it's a very simple program, no problem, but in actual enterprise project, this is a huge problem. Now, whenever you are writing a process builder and whenever you're using the update, this part takes one SQL. That's internally. So, okay, that makes sense. So one SQL became 2 SQL because one is written in trigger, one is used by process builder internally. The question is, how did the third one came? Now, if you go on sequence of operation from the Salesforce side, this is very important page. Bookmark it, download it, print it on your wall and have it in your muscle memory. So it says how when you write a trigger or whenever you try to save a record internally, what happens. All points good. The important point is line number 13. It says, if there is a process builder and flow, because of process or workflow action, the affected record goes through the save procedure again. That means what is happening is when you try to create or save the lead record, this trigger gets executed, fine. Then process builder gets executed, and because of process builder, your trigger goes again. So this your code is executing 2 times, which is a problem because as Salesforce clearly says on line number 13, that process builder causes your trigger to execute multiple. And if you want to see, I have a detailed blog post here where I'm talking about process builder trigger. If I search my website, here I have like 3-year-old blog, why to avoid using workflow rule and the process builder field update with trigger. You can go through this blog and try to understand what I'm trying to say. Exactly same thing that I just explained. So how to solve the problem? So this is a real problem. We created a trigger, it worked like charm, everything is good. Then we created a process builder, again everything worked fine. However, when we mix trigger and the process builder, our code is executing multiple times. The simplest way to solve is, let me explain you I'm not going to say anything. So there is a concept of static variable in Salesforce. So static variable makes sure that in a single transaction, you are not losing the context, you still retain the value. So what I'm going to do is I am going to change. I know that this method is being called multiple times. If I can have something which only execute once, my problem would be solved. So what I will do is I will create a static method. Again, we have covered static variable and static method in, I guess, episode 2 or 3. Go back on our channel, go through that episode. So exactly same, what I'm saying is public static, let's say I'm going to return this class itself, and this method name, let's say, is get instance, and it is also going to get set of this. And what I will do is I will say I'm going to create one more static variable of the same class type, and I will say name obj, and I will say if this obj is null, that means it is executing first time, then only you say that obj equals to new reading map util, and we will pass this company name. That's it. So now what is happening is there is only one copy of static in a memory. So even if the trigger executes 10 times or multiple times, doesn't matter. It will only first time the static was null. That is the reason this will execute. After that, it will never execute. Now, just to be on safer side, we don't want anyone externally. So for in our code here, we call the constructor. We don't want this capability. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make it private. So private means this can be called only by this class. Nobody else can call it. So that's fine. This class is calling new operator constructor. So no problem here. Line number 8 is giving some error. Public static. Let's try to save it. Okay, return statement is missing. So I'm saying return obj. Okay. Perfect. Now what I have to do is I have to go back here. Now all I will do is I will say the class name is still rating map util, and I'm not going to call constructor from here because constructor is getting called by this method. All I'm going to do is I'm going to call the get instance method. Everything else is exactly same. Perfect. All good. We have a debug log. Initially, it was one SQL query. We have another debug log, which proves that unnecessary SQLs are being fired. All I did is a very minor change. I created a get instance method. I made it static. I made this class instance obj as a static. Only first time it is null. When the first time trigger runs, every time else static is going to retain its value, and it is going to call the constructor from this method instead of the trigger handler. We made constructor private. So if any other class try to use a new word, they will get an error saying that constructor does not exist, and everything is exactly same. Now let's try it. It is going to work or not. So I have this lead. I am going to add it. I'm going to change it as IBM. I'm going to make none. Let's save it. If everything worked, the rating I'm expecting as hot. So as you can see, rating is hot. Let's go on the developer console, open the log. New log is 20 KB. Let's see. If you go down here, this is exactly what we want. Instead of executing 3 times, it executed only 2 times. That's exactly what we made sure, that this object does not get created multiple times. This object gets created only one time. If you don't use a static variable, every time the trigger executes, it is going to call this method multiple times, and it is going to create a new multiple times. If we want to maintain the status, use a static variable. And this design pattern, which makes sure that your code is only executing one time, single time, is called as Singleton design pattern. We just achieved, and that's pretty important. And you're going to use so many times in your career if you're a Salesforce developer. So that's all about Singleton design pattern. In my book, I have text design pattern. I have explained another example. You can go through that book and understand more scenario where we need a Singleton pattern. So that's all about Singleton design pattern. Keep posting your question on chat window. I am going to cover something pretty new. So there is another design pattern, which is a factory pattern. And what factory pattern says is, this is a creational pattern, and we use a factory to create an object without specifying the exact class name. And we can take a help of either interface or the child classes, and we potentially implement it in a base class rather by calling the constructors directly. So let's try to understand how to do it. But before doing it, let's try to understand the problem. So we have half an hour left. So we have written a trigger on lead. Okay. I cannot write a new class here. So let me write it down here. So we have written a trigger on lead. Any new developer, let's say Salesforce coming from Java, .NET, right? They need to understand everything what is happening on the lead or any trigger. So basically, there are multiple events. So for an example, first of all, there are two types, right? There are before trigger, there are before event, and there are after event. Now, even in before event, you can have before insert, you can have before update, and you can have before delete. These are the main. Now, same in the after context, you can have after insert, you can have after update, and you can have after delete. And so now the thing is, being working on the Salesforce platform for the long time, you might be aware about it, but not every developer might follow this and they might not know about it. So how to make a developer's life easier? They don't worry about, okay, it's a before insert event or what, right? What we can do is to help those developer or to set up the standard process in your company, we can create an interface. As we discussed previously, interface is nothing but a contract. So I am saying, okay, let's create an interface named something like, we are creating an interface for trigger. As per the best practice, we should start I specifies interface. So I'm creating interface for trigger. And what basically I'm doing is something like this here. So I will say public interface, and we are going to have few of the method. So the few method we are going to have in the before insert, this needs to be a void. So all of the method needs to be void. So I will just make sure all of the method are void. And then in the before insert, we don't get any old value that we know. So we'll say, now this needs to work for every object. It should work for lead, it should work for account and contact. Now at the design writing compile time, we don't know who is going to use this interface. So safest way, you can always use S object. So I'm saying, okay, S object is, let's say this. Now for the before update, we can get S object old S object, and we can also get S object, which would be new S object. Same way for before delete, we only get single S object, so it's pretty standard S objects SO. Now same way after insert, we are going to get S object only. After update, we are going to get the new value and the old value. So I have old value, and then I have new value. Same way after delete, I'm not going to get any old value. So I will say, actually I'm not going, yeah, S object SO, because the record is being deleted. There is no new or there is no nothing there, right? So that's pretty straightforward. So what we said is, let's create this interface and the developers should follow this. So I'm missing bunch of semicolons here. Now the next thing we need to tell, so we don't want developer to write something like this. So right now, lead trigger, everything is perfectly fine. The problem is it is not structured. You are writing, assuming that the writer knows each and everything in detail. They may follow best practice, they may not follow the best practice. Introducing interface is always a good idea, as it is a contract and developers must follow. So we ask every developer, if you want to write any lead handler, so I will say lead handler. We already have lead trigger handler. I'm saying we have lead handler. Every developer must implement iTrigger, which we created. So if this is the best practice in your org and developer tried to create or save this class, let's see what happens. Why it is not? Okay. Still saving, some problem with my developer console. Meanwhile, it is saving. What I will do is I will create a new Apex class, and this is a one time. Every time developer has to implement iTrigger, but we want to have a utility class which will make sure that all those methods are being called in the right manner. So what we will do is we will have trigger factory class. It is always best practice to have a with sharing keyword here. If you don't write a with sharing keyword, it will bypass OWD and the sharing rule. It says I got some error. I don't know what to do. We'll see how this goes. Otherwise, I will refresh my developer console. That is the reason normally we use a VS Code, but I'm bypassing VS Code today. So what I want to do here is I want to create a static method, public static, let's say void. I want to create a utility method named handler, and I want to pass what is the type of S object. If you remember, right, in my iTrigger, these are the S object. Now S object type, okay, let me refresh it. It's a safer. Oh, sweet. So we lost everything here. I will open lead trigger again. I will open lead handler. I will open lead trigger handler. That was the old code. I will open trigger factory, I guess I had. I will open iTrigger also. That's what we built. And what I was trying to do is in the trigger factory, sorry, lead handler, we want to do something like this. Implements iTrigger, and let's try to save it. The container belongs to the container currently has unfinished save request. Okay. I don't know what can be done here. There another way to do it is I will simply take another shortcut. I can directly go in Apex classes. I have very few here. I know that we are trying to work on the lead handler here. I will directly go here and try to say this lead handler implements iTrigger. Try to quick save. Now you see this is the error I was talking about, because if I go here, our trigger clearly says that all these methods must be implemented. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy this. I'm going to save here. And right now I'm not going to write any logic. I will just have braces here. Okay, one missing I have is everything should be public. So this was the way in 2008 and 9 we were doing coding when there was no developer console. We only had an Eclipse. Still works. Old is gold. So lead handler, this is how. So exactly what we did is we are going to write a lead handler, which is going to, so now all you have to do to ask any developer if you want to work on the lead trigger, account trigger, or contact trigger, all you have to do now is just go ahead and implement the trigger. Now, let's say if this problem resolved. I'm still getting an error. Let's see. Okay. So I can use the trigger factory. So what I need in the trigger factory, now this is the utility method. You don't need to write it every time. So I will have public static void. What was the name I was trying to have? Okay, yeah, create handler. And the data type I want to pass here is, we have schema class in Salesforce, and in schema type we have S object type. This gives me that which S object, so every standard object and the custom object is S object. And if you're creating a definition, you will have that entry here. So I'm saying, okay, I'm going to pass that as object type. Now, all we have to do is, let's assume that we are going to create a method get handler. And this get handler is going to return me trigger. Let's say something like handler. Now the beauty is, in the last episode, episode 1, we talk about solid principle. In one of the principle, last principle is you should be easily able to assign child class to the parent. So basically, if you see this, trigger is the parent interface, lead handler is the child. This object data type is lead handler, and this object data type is also trigger because this is the parent. So basically, you can say trigger handler equals to something like lead handler. Now something like this. Now we don't want to hard code this, because lead handler, if you can see our class, lead handler is also trigger. I don't want to hard code is, I want this to be returned using get handler method, and I'm going to pass as object type. So this is time to write this method. So this is pretty simple method. All we are going to do here is, I'm going to have private static, the return type, I want return type as trigger, and method name is get handler. As object type we are going to pass, which is nothing but this one. And here all we have to do is if else condition. So here I'm saying if so type equals to lead objects type. So I can say as object type. I know that the class for the lead is this one, return new lead handler, because that's the class we just created. If it founds, great, otherwise at the end we will return null. Let's try to save it. Perfect, everything works. So as you can see, get handler worked. All we want to do now is, any new developer comes, they should directly call this method. And if they call this method, we will get, okay, what is the right class? And then all we have to do here is, let's create another method which is going to take care of the sequence of execution. So you don't want developer to go back initially, at least for a few days, okay, you go back and read the sequence of execution. Rather, what we will do is, we will read it and let's see what it says. It says executes all before trigger. So let's write a class which follows this logic. So what we are going to do is here, let's create a new method, maybe named, what would be the right way to do it? Let's have a method name private. I don't want this to be called from external class. Now I know that every trigger handler is iTrigger. So I will say iTrigger. We already got a handler. Now what I will do is, if trigger is before, now this is the, you can go on the documentation, see, this is how we detect in the trigger that it is a before event or after event. Now this handler iTrigger has these methods. Our lead handler also have these methods because lead handler is following this contract. Now we will call this method one by one. So what we are going to do is, we will say if it is before, and if trigger dot, is it delete? If it is delete, then call the delete method, handler dot, we have before delete method, as you can see. And the data type which we are going to have is simply, let's see, what we are going to do here is for, so in it is going to call by trigger context. I will say equals to only trigger dot old would be there, and for each trigger dot old, call this method. Now where is this method? This method is here, which says before delete. And trigger handler, if I go on lead handler, you can see that lead handler also has the before. Right now everything is blank, but there is going to be logic here. So that's all we handled is delete part. Now we have two more part here, is else. If this is trigger dot, let's say is insert, same way we have to follow this. The only difference would be we are saying before insert, and before insert also going to have trigger dot new, not trigger dot old. Same way there is going to be before dot update, and we are saying that okay, in update part we are going to have, let's say, trigger dot, you can iterate through anything, trigger dot old. Then what we will say before let's say update, let's go back on the definition. It says before update first parameter is old, so we are going to pass the first parameter is this one. The next parameter what we are going to say is trigger also have the variable saying new map, and the new map we will get the ID. So this actually will return the new record. Let's try to save it. Perfect. So that's all. So if you see, this is the if part, I will copy paste exactly same. In fact, I don't need if condition, and I know these are delete, is insert, is after. Instead of before, I have to call the after methods. And that's it. Now if anybody wants to use this, so here is what we have to do. So now we made everything easier. Nobody needs to go back, read this document. All they have to do is, if they are writing any trigger or anything, all they have to call now is something like this. They will say something like where we have this trigger factory dot. If you go in the trigger factory, it says create handler. And in create handler, all you have to say is we are on the lead object as object. Now let's see how it is going to work. Wait. Lead dot as object. Perfect. So what just happened is we are not going to do this. We are going to do this. Trigger factory create handler. It goes in the create handler. It says, oh, what is my type? Okay, let's go on get handler method. Get handler says, oh, am I a lead type? Okay, then return the lead handler. So lead handler basically implements iTrigger, and if something is implementing iTrigger, which is a contract, I'm damn sure that it has this 6 method mentioned or laid out by the iTrigger. So lead handler is always there. And now instead of saying update lead here, right, this logic can be easily moved from here to lead handler before update here. And this list of lead basically would be the new. Okay, yeah, so basically if you see here, our code is bulkified code. We can little bit improve this as well. What we can do is in iTrigger we can introduce one more method saying that bulk before and bulk after, something like this. Bulk before and bulk after, and as it is we can post our code. Or what we have to do is in the bulk, so yeah, bulk before we would need, and we have to write the same logic here we are writing, but we don't need to write a logic here. Rather, we will write a logic in one of these methods. Now the advantage of this approach, like I said, first time it is really a lot of work, but this trigger factory and iTrigger only built once. Now onwards, all you have to tell your developer, if you want to write a trigger, just say trigger factory.create handler, and you should have your own class like lead handler which implements iTrigger, and all of your logic should be in these method. The advantage, you don't need to make sure that, oh, is this method always going to be executed before insert, or this method is always going to be executed after insert, because all those heavy lifting already done here. And actually I have not called execute method yet, so I have to do something like this. The execute method is doing all the heavy lifting. It is making sure that okay, trigger is before or trigger is delete. If yes, then call handlers before delete. If trigger is insert, then call before insert. So all those if else, or because these are repetitive, we want to avoid all these repetition. So now our trigger is pretty easy. Just write a method in here and it will take care of everything. So that concluded today's episode. Again, you can go on my book and you can read all these patterns in very detail. So this book follows the same principle like I did. I create a problem first, explain the problem, and then the right way to do it using any design pattern. So basically summary of classes in the trigger, what we did is we write a trigger on lead. This calls trigger factory. You don't need to change trigger, or don't need to write trigger factory always. Only you have to write, as you can see, blue is only the new thing you're writing. You're only writing trigger on lead. You're writing lead handler. If you already have written a trigger on lead, then ignore it. Only you have to do is keep changing the lead handler. Trigger factory is one time, iTrigger is one time. However, like I said in the episode 1, every design pattern has some caveat. One problem in this factory pattern is every time you write a new trigger, you need to keep adding if else. Now there is another smart way to do it that maybe we can talk in the next session, but this is the disadvantage of the factory pattern. You have everything in this one big class, that one big class needs to keep maintained. So that's it for today. I'm 3 minutes short, but now I will take questions. Let me see. Is there any trailhead for design pattern concept? So Dharmesh, there is no actual design pattern, I don't see much design pattern there. There is a trailhead for the enterprise pattern, which is completely a different concept on how you organize your classes, like as a domain selector layer, but not, or DAO layer, but not really a design pattern. You would not find any trailhead. You can certainly, so if I go back here, there are some good URL I have suggested, and one of the book is written by me, and this book covers a lot of design pattern. Anyone, any other question? If you want, you can unmute your mic and you can ask directly.
Hey, Jitendra, it's Craig.
Hey, Craig.
I wanted to talk to you privately offline about a piece of software, but I wanted to ask something about the whole path to code process. One thing I noticed, and I know for a beginner like me, it would be helpful. There doesn't seem to be any explanations, a pathway to get something up on the App Exchange or license a piece of software. Where Android and iPhone, it's like really easy. You can just go do something. Is there? I don't know if that's something you'd want to include in your list, because I think a lot of developers would probably like to write code for Salesforce, and it doesn't seem like there's. I don't know. That's just my take. It was because we're all learning how to write code. I am too. So anyway, that was my take. I don't know if it's already existing. So.
Also, Craig, good point. I see there is an App Exchange Partner Basics trail. If you can see my screen right now.
Yeah, I do. Yeah.
Yeah, so this explains a lot, and then there is I'm pretty sure there should be some trail also, like how to get started Exchange Partner Program, understand the life cycle, right, and all the process. I'm pretty sure there are a lot of information there, but I will say it's a little bit lengthy process this time.
Okay, yeah, cool. Because I know everyone respects you, and if you wrote like, here's how to take an app to market, everybody would like, yeah. I don't know. I'm just, it was, because you have a lot of respect in the community overall. So, yeah, that was my take. So, yeah.
Yeah, no problem, Craig. We'll talk later. Anyone have?
Good.
Yeah, anyone have any other question? Okay, so I think we are good. I will try my best to have a next session next week. But unfortunately, my current project's deployment is also coming on the Wednesday same time. So that is the reason I'm canceling some of my path to code from the last few weeks. We'll keep eye on blog. I'm almost 80% sure that I will be able to take next week as episode. If not, I will let you know the new date. Thanks, everyone. And
thanks, Jitendra.
Yeah, thanks for joining. Have a nice day. Bye.